What's up, everyone? I am back. It's been a somewhat chaotic few weeks. I was out of town a bunch, and then I got COVID and had to cancel some shows and didn't really get a chance to practice or play all that much, but that's all right. I'm back and debatably better than ever. So today I'm going to talk about an ability that I think every drummer needs to have. It definitely makes you sound a lot more legit, and I'm referring to playing different dynamics between your hands simultaneously. This could also extend to your feet, particularly the bass drum. You want to be able to play at various dynamics with your bass drum regardless of what your hands are doing, but today we're going to focus on just the hands. Drummers that can play really tasty grooves often will keep time on the hi-hats or the ride cymbal and just keep a steady pattern going, but then with their left hand on the snare drum, they'll be able to play accents for backbeats and ghost notes in between, and whatever they're doing with their left hand doesn't really have any bearing on the motions of their right hand. To get the motions of the hands sort of independent from one another, we need to take a step back and examine stroke types. And I'm not talking about single strokes or double strokes. Stroke types refer to the motions of the sticks, and there are 4 different stroke types. First up, we have full strokes, where the stick begins and ends in a high position. That typically creates a louder sound, and it also prepares us to play another louder stroke. Then we have downstrokes, which is where the stick begins in a high position and ends in a low position. And that's also associated with a loud sound, but it prepares us to play a quiet sound after it. Next, we have tap strokes, which is where the stick begins and ends in a low position. And that creates a nice quiet sound, and it also prepares us to play another quiet sound. And last but not least, we have upstrokes, where the stick begins in a low position but ends in a high position. That also generally creates a softer sound, but it prepares us to play a louder sound next. Keeping those different stroke types in the back of your mind makes it a lot easier to play at a wider range of dynamics. Now, that does not mean that you necessarily need to sit there and break down every single one of your movements and kind of categorize all of them as full strokes, downstrokes, taps, and upstrokes, but understanding how the sticks move and how those movements translate to different dynamics is really helpful. So to start, I would take both your hands and play in unison, just sequences of full, down, tap, up, 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 full, down, tap, up. And pay attention to those upstrokes in particular. They can be somewhat elusive, and I think a lot of drummers sleep on the importance of lifting the stick. And I like to think of the motion of upstrokes as touching something really hot and then pulling your hand back away from it. The stroke is more or less generated by the recoil of pulling my arm back, but keeping my wrist really loose. So I'm not really throwing the stick down for upstrokes. It's really more generated by just my pulling back. Next, we'll use flams to begin practicing getting our hands moving in opposite directions. With flams, there are 2 components. We have the grace stroke, which starts real low, and then the primary stroke, which starts at a more regular height. It's good practice to alternate your flams. So whichever stick is playing the grace note should play an upstroke, where it begins in a low position but ends in a high position, and then whichever stick is playing the primary stroke should play a downstroke, beginning in a high position, ending in a low position. So let's get some alternating flams happening. When you're playing flams like this, try to exaggerate the motions. So keep the grace notes really, really, really low, and then keep the primary strokes nice and high. And you just want to practice alternating these. So one stick is kind of going down while the other is going up. And that's going to translate very nicely to the drum set when we start playing around with grooves. Essentially, one hand is playing quietly while the other one is playing loud. And of course, with flams, there's a tiny bit of space between the grace note and the primary stroke, but when we start applying these movements to drum set and grooves and whatnot, we're going to try to flatten out those flams to get the hands playing in unison. So this next exercise is going to use only the snare drum and the ride cymbal. Conceptually, it's pretty easy. One hand is going to play loud while the other one plays quietly, and then we're going to switch. But in execution, it might not be so simple at first. With the hands playing in unison, we'll start by doing 8 loud strokes on the ride cymbal with the right hand, while the left hand does 8 quiet strokes on the snare drum, and then we're going to switch. So then the left hand will do 8 loud strokes on the snare drum, while the right hand does 8 quiet strokes on the ride cymbal. And you just want to pay careful attention to the size of your motions. Smaller motions will create quieter sounds, larger motions will create louder sounds. Now, very often, we'll just be playing one static dynamic with the right hand. So for this next exercise, we're just going to play eighth notes on the ride cymbal, but every stroke should be a full stroke. So always pulling the stick back up to a high position. And then with the left hand on the snare drum, we're going to do permutations of 2 16th notes. So first, the left hand will just go 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E. Then it'll go 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a. Then it'll go 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and finally 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and. Now we'll apply some of these motions in a groove. So just between my kick and snare, we're going to fill every single 16th note. We're going to go kick, left, left, kick, left, kick, left, left, kick, left, left, kick, left, kick, left, left. And we'll always accent beats 2 and 4 on the snare drum. That's our backbeat. I'll do that under eighth notes, a couple of 3/16th gallop patterns like 1E and, 2E and, 3E and, 4E and, as well as 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and then finally just full-on 16th notes. Keeping that same kick and snare pattern going, I'm going to start to add some accents to some of these left-hand strokes, and this will force us to utilize combinations of downstrokes and tap strokes and upstrokes, all in the setting of a groove. So the first variation, I'll accent the E of beats 1 and 3, and then in the next variation, I'll accent the of beats 2 and 4, and then finally, I'll combine all of them. So those are some examples and exercises that you can practice to get yourself more comfortable splitting up the dynamics between your hands. Try taking these motions and applying them to your own grooves and see what kind of combinations you can come up with. If you like what you saw in this video, check out my Patreon page. Your support grants you access to transcriptions for this video, as well as transcriptions for all my other lesson videos. And follow me on Instagram @DrumMerhar to see more videos of my playing. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.